Imagine this. After weeks or months of painful silence, your phone lights up. One message, one name. The person who once drained you suddenly wants access again. Before you respond, understand this. Their message isn't random, and the way you answer can change the entire dynamic forever. The ending of this will surprise you. If you've ever dealt with someone who disappears and returns like it's a game, stay with me, because understanding this moment could save you months or even years of emotional damage. When a narcissist finally reaches out after silence, the first thing you need to understand is this. They are not doing it because they suddenly realized your value, felt genuine remorse, or experienced emotional clarity. Narcissists break silence only when they need supply. Supply can be attention, validation, control, emotional reaction, admiration, or even the comfort of knowing you're still available for them. Their silence was never meant to give you space, and their return isn't a sign of change. It's driven by a need inside them, not care for you. Narcissists operate through cycles, and silence is part of their pattern. When something or someone else isn't giving them what they want, or when their life becomes dull, they look backward to the people they once drained, testing to see who still responds. This is why their message often feels sudden, oddly timed, or strangely out of place. It appears when you're finally healing or when your focus shifts away from them. They sense that shift like radar. Narcissists don't reach out because they miss you. They reach out because they miss what you once gave them without question. What you must realize is that their return is transactional. They are checking to see if they can still get emotional energy from you. If you answer warmly, they get supply. If you answer angrily, they get supply. Even if you answer neutrally, they read it as an invitation to keep probing. Your emotions, your attention, and your presence have always been currency for them. Narcissists return the moment they fear that currency is slipping away. Their silence beforehand is also part of the same system. When they go quiet, it's usually because they're occupied with another source of supply, dealing with an issue they don't want you to know about, or using distance as a way to regain power. They return only when they feel it benefits them. Their timing is rarely accidental. They might reach out on a day that matters to you, during a moment when you're vulnerable, or when they sense something in your life is improving. They don't want to lose the psychological grip they once held. So when they break silence, it's a move based entirely on their needs, not you well-being. When a narcissist reaches out after silence, their message is almost never spontaneous. It is calculated, deliberate, and crafted to trigger a specific reaction in you. Their communication, whether it appears warm, apologetic, casual, or urgently emotional, is a strategy. They send it to measure your emotional temperature. They want to see if you're still easily influenced, if you still care, or if you've detached from them. Every word is chosen with an intention. If they message you with kindness, they're testing whether you're still open to them. If they reach out with a vague "hey" or "how have you been," they're testing whether you'll carry the emotional labor. If they open with something dramatic like "I need to talk" or "something reminded me of you," they're testing whether you still prioritize them. Nothing is random. Narcissists study patterns, and your reactions were once their blueprint. The message itself is a tool in their psychological toolbox. For them, it's not about reconnecting, it's about gathering data. They want to know if the silence created panic or pain in you. They want to see if you respond quickly or slowly. They want to see if you still offer empathy, concern, or curiosity. Even your hesitation becomes information to them. If You answer too quickly. They know they still own a piece of your emotional space. If you respond with long explanations or justified feelings, they know they can still pull your strings. If you react with anger, they feel validated that you're still emotionally invested. Every reaction tells them who you are to them now. This is why their messages often have multiple layers. The surface feels innocent, but underneath it's designed to pull you back into familiar roles. They might mirror your past conversations, mimic tenderness, or reference old memories that once bonded you. These are not sentimental gestures, they are hooks. They are carefully placed triggers meant to revive your attachment or curiosity. Their silence breaks only when they need something: attention, reassurance, validation, or access, and the message they send is their first step in finding out whether you will offer it. They don't ask themselves how you feel, they ask what you can still give. Their outreach is a psychological move driven by self interest, crafted with precision, and delivered with an agenda. When a narcissist reaches out after a long period of silence, the very first reaction you give becomes their data set. Narcissists observe emotional responses the way a scientist studies results in a lab. They look for patterns, vulnerabilities, and openings. Your first reply, whether it's one word, a paragraph, a delay, or total silence, tells them everything they need to know about how much influence they still have over you. They are not listening to the words themselves. They are reading the emotional temperature behind them. If you respond immediately, they interpret it as emotional availability. If you respond angrily, they interpret it as emotional investment. If you respond with sadness, they see an opening for manipulation. Even if your response is neutral but long, they see you as someone who still feels the need to explain or justify yourself. Every tone, every pause, every sentence becomes information. This is why they choose their timing so carefully. They know the power of the first message, and they know the power of the first reaction. They rely on your instinctive emotional response, the part of you that remembers the bond or the pain, because they want you to react before you think. Narcissists thrive on emotional reflexes, not logical decisions. So if your first response shows that they can still affect you, they gain confidence that you're still part of their psychological network. They want to see that the door they once used is still unlocked. And it's crucial to understand that narcissists don't hear your boundaries, they observe your behavior. You could say, "I'm done," 100 times. But if you respond with emotion the moment they return, they don't believe your words. They believe your reaction. That initial reaction becomes the foundation of what they'll try next. If you show pain, they may switch to sympathy. If you show anger, they may play victim. If you show hope, they may offer crumbs of affection. Your first reaction directs their next move. This is why calmness is your greatest power. A measured, delayed, or minimal response disrupts their expectations. They can't decode neutrality. It creates uncertainty, and uncertainty weakens their grip. Your controlled reaction becomes the moment where their sense of power begins to slip. When a narcissist reaches out after a stretch of silence, the tone they choose is rarely accidental. They often return with false warmth or a carefully crafted display of vulnerability because these are the two most effective ways to disarm you. They know that direct manipulation won't work immediately after silence, so they soften their approach. They might send a sweet message, something nostalgic, or something that sounds like genuine concern. Or they may take the opposite route and present themselves as wounded, stressed, or in need of comfort. Both strategies serve one purpose: lowering your guard. False warmth is meant to make you forget the discomfort their silence created. Manufactured vulnerability is meant to trigger the empathy they know you naturally have. To them, vulnerability is not an emotional truth, it's a tactic. Narcissists are aware that silence creates distance, and distance creates clarity. When you're away from them for long enough, you begin to see patterns, heal, and regain strength. They feel this shift. When they sense you pulling away emotionally, they adjust their approach to regain access. So they use a tone that feels safer, softer, or familiar. They want you to doubt your own boundaries. They want you to question whether they really meant to hurt you. They want you to wonder if maybe they're finally opening up. This is the emotional trap. What many people don't realize is that these displays rarely reflect real emotional change. A narcissist's warmth is situational, and their vulnerability appears only when it benefits them. If they're being affectionate, it's because they want reassurance. If they're being vulnerable, it's because they want sympathy. They shape their tone according to what they believe will get the quickest emotional response from you. That's why their messages can feel strangely targeted, almost like they remember exactly what used to work on you. In reality, they do remember. They remember what softened you, what made you stay, what made you forgive. Their return is not about healing the relationship, it's about regaining their emotional leverage. The warmth and vulnerability they show are not meant to build connection, but to pull you back into a cycle you finally started stepping away from. Not responding to a narcissist after they break a long silence is one of the strongest responses you can give, because it disrupts the entire structure of the dynamic they rely on. Narcissists depend on emotional reactions, positive or negative, to feel in control. They don't care whether you're angry, hurt, confused, or hopeful. They only care that you're emotionally engaged. Silence removes that engagement, and it removes the energy they feed on. When you choose not to reply, you're not being passive. You're communicating something powerful without words, that your emotional world no longer revolves around them. This is something a narcissist cannot easily tolerate. Your lack of response creates a psychological vacuum, and in that vacuum, their insecurity grows. They begin to question their power, their influence, and their hold over you. Silence also protects you from being pulled back into old patterns. Responding, even with the most neutral message, can reopen emotional wounds or give them a new opening to manipulate you. By not responding, you stop the cycle before it even starts. You give yourself space to think, to observe their behavior, and to understand their true intention without being pulled into the emotional confusion they rely on. Your silence becomes a boundary that requires no explanation. It shows that you're prioritizing your well-being over their need for attention. What makes silence such a powerful response is that narcissists interpret it in the opposite way from healthy people. Where a healthy person might see silence as disinterest or closure, a narcissist sees it as a challenge. They begin to feel exposed, irrelevant, or replaced. This triggers their anxiety about losing supply. They may send another message, switch tones, or escalate their reach-out attempts. All of this reveals something important. Your silence exposes their motive. If their intention was genuine care, they would respect your space. If their intention was manipulation, they will push harder. Not responding gives you clarity. It allows you to step outside the emotional fog and see their patterns clearly. And while silence may feel uncomfortable at first, it is often the response that protects you the most, because it refuses to give them what they want, your emotional energy. In that refusal, you take back the power they once depended on. If you decide that you must respond to a narcissist after they break their silence, the only protection you truly have is emotional neutrality. This means responding without warmth, without frustration, without explanation, and without giving them any emotional content they can use. Narcissists don't listen to words, they analyze emotions. They study tone, urgency, vulnerability, and emotional hints hidden inside your message. When you respond neutrally, you give them nothing to work with. You don't feed their ego, you don't validate their stories, and you don't provide the emotional charge they rely on to pull you back into the cycle. Neutrality prevents them from extracting supply, and this immediately shifts the power dynamic. Emotional neutrality isn't coldness, it's clarity. It's the ability to remain grounded while they attempt to test your boundaries. It's replying in a way that doesn't reveal whether you're still attached, still hurt, or still hoping. This is what confuses them. Narcissists are comfortable when someone reacts strongly because strong reactions are predictable. Neutrality is unpredictable to them. They don't know how to read someone who isn't responding from emotion, and that uncertainty weakens their sense of control. Neutrality also sets a psychological boundary without you having to explain or justify anything. Narcissists thrive on pulling you into long discussions where they twist your words, redirect blame, or lure you back into emotional chaos. A neutral response shuts down the opportunity for emotional games. It shortens communication and keeps you in control of the pace and tone of the conversation. It also protects you from being dragged into guilt, pity, or nostalgia. When you respond in a grounded and detached manner, you communicate that the emotional version of you they once fed on is no longer accessible. They realize that their old tactics, flattery, threats, guilt, or charm, no longer land the way they used to. And this forces them to confront the truth they fear most. You're not the same person they left behind. You're not reacting. You're not falling into the script. You're not giving them supply. This loss of emotional access often causes them to retreat or switch strategies. But either way, your neutrality creates a protective barrier that their manipulation can't pass through. When a narcissist comes back after silence, their return is almost never about reconciliation. It is a setup designed to reestablish control. Narcissists view relationships through the lens of power, not connection. When they reappear, they are checking whether they can still influence your emotions and shift your behavior. Their return is the beginning of a new cycle, not the repair of an old one. They may act gentle or attentive at first, but that is simply the opening move. Once they feel you've softened, the familiar patterns begin creeping back in. The criticism, the dismissiveness, the blame shifting, the gaslighting, it all returns because their core intention hasn't changed. They want access, not equality. They want compliance, not communication. When you respond, even lightly, they begin testing boundaries. They may push deeper into emotional topics or subtly question your choices. They may pretend to be reflective, but it's temporary. They're assessing your weaknesses, trying to see what they can use. If they sense loneliness or confusion in your voice, they will lean into it. If they sense hope, they will feed it. If they sense guilt, they will exploit it. Their return is a calculated move, and the goal is always control. They want to restore the dynamic where your emotions orbit around theirs. They want to be the center again. What makes this phase dangerous is that it can feel like a fresh start, but it's actually a setup for more emotional disruption. Narcissists often return with the exact personality you fell for in the beginning. They act caring, attentive, or emotionally open. This is the hook. They use this early kindness to pull you back into the cycle, so the later withdrawal and manipulation hit harder. The pattern is predictable, but the emotional impact is strong because it plays on your memory of who you hoped they were. Their goal is not reconciliation, it is re-control. Once they feel they have regained emotional influence over you, the warmth fades. They shift into criticism, demands, or emotional distance. The cycle restarts. And this is why their return should never be mistaken for genuine change, because the intention behind it is rooted in power, not connection. The most powerful truth when a narcissist reaches out after silence is that your growth, not your reply, determines the outcome. Narcissists are drawn to old dynamics, to emotional reflexes they once controlled. They return expecting that the patterns that once worked on you will still function, that your boundaries are still porous, and that your emotions are still readily available for them to manipulate. What they do not anticipate, and what often shocks them, is a version of you that has healed, strengthened, and developed clear boundaries. When you have grown, your response is no longer about reaction or compliance. It is about observation and self-protection. This shift changes the entire power dynamic. They can no longer predict your behavior because the person they once influenced is no longer present in the same way. Your emotional independence becomes a force they cannot easily counteract. Growth is visible to a narcissist in subtle ways. It shows in your calmness, your measured responses, or even your choice not to respond at all. They notice the absence of fear, longing, or guilt that they once triggered effortlessly. They notice that their attempts to manipulate, charm, or provoke no longer produce the intended effect. This is unsettling for them because their power is based on predictability, on knowing how you will react. When you step out of that predictable pattern, they lose their control and their usual strategies fail. Your growth transforms what they expect from a return into something they cannot navigate. Importantly, this growth-centered approach is about more than simply avoiding manipulation. It is about reclaiming your energy, restoring your emotional autonomy, and refusing to allow someone else to define your emotional landscape. By maintaining this stance, you remove the incentive for them to linger. They may attempt to engage, but their engagement becomes increasingly ineffective. The more you demonstrate that your life and emotions are intact without their input, the more their presence diminishes. Ultimately, the real shock is that when you have grown fully, the narcissist often disappears. Not because you rejected them with aggression or confrontation, but because your growth alone removes the leverage they seek. Your boundaries, self-respect, and emotional independence create a space where their influence cannot survive. And that is the most profound and lasting response of all.